Hey there, Ruthhaven Grounds family. Today we're diving into one of the most fascinating soil experiments I've conducted in my garden, and trust me, the results are going to change how you think about feeding your soil microbes. We're talking about rice. Yes, that staple, sitting in your pantry. And its incredible power to wake up the underground workforce in your garden beds. But here's the twist. Does it matter if you use cooked or raw rice? Grab your favorite gardening beverage and let's dig into this together. Because what happens in just 48 hours might surprise you. Before we compare cooked versus raw rice, let me tell you why I even started experimenting with rice in the first place. Your soil isn't just dirt, it's a living ecosystem teeming with billions of microorganisms. We're talking bacteria, fungi, protozoa, and countless other microscopic helpers that break down organic matter, cycle nutrients, and literally feed your plants. The problem is, these little workers need food too, and they particularly love carbohydrates. Rice is essentially pure carbohydrate energy, and when you introduce it to your soil, it's like ringing the dinner bell for microbes. Within hours, populations explode, creating a feeding frenzy of biological activity that transforms your soil structure and nutrient availability. I've been experimenting with various soil amendments for years here at Ruthhaven Grounds, but rice has become one of my go-to ingredients for quick microbial activation, especially when I'm preparing new beds or revitalizing tired soil. Here's how I set up this comparison test, and you can easily replicate it at home. I took 2 identical containers filled with the same garden soil from my property. Nothing special, just typical garden earth that hadn't been amended recently. In one container I mixed in 2 tablespoons of raw, white rice, burying it about 2 inches deep. In the other, I used the same amount of cooked white rice that had been sitting at room temperature, also buried at the same depth. I kept both containers in the same location with identical moisture levels, damp but not waterlogged, similar to what you'd find in a healthy garden bed after a good watering. The temperature stayed consistent around 70 degrees Fahrenheit, which is optimal for most soil microbes. Then I waited, checking both containers every 12 hours to observe what was happening. Let me tell you what happened with the raw rice because it was genuinely fascinating. For the first 24 hours, not much appeared to be happening on the surface. The rice grains were visible but looked unchanged. However, when I carefully excavated around them, at the 48-hour mark, something remarkable had occurred beneath the surface. The raw rice had begun to soften and show early signs of decomposition. The grains were swelling as they absorbed moisture from the soil, and under magnification, I could see the beginning of fungal threads starting to colonize the surface. The soil immediately surrounding the rice had a slightly different texture. It felt more aggregated and crumbly compared to the untreated soil in other parts of the container. But here's the thing about raw rice. It requires a longer enzymatic process to break down. The starches are locked up in a crystalline structure that microbes need time to access. Think of it like giving your soil microbes a wrapped present. The good stuff is there, but they need to work through the packaging first. The microbial activity was definitely increasing, as evidenced by the slight warming of the soil in that area and the subtle earthy smell that indicated biological processes were ramping up, but it was still in the early stages. Now, the cooked rice container told a completely different story, and honestly, this is where things got exciting. Remember, cooked rice has already been gelatinized by heat and water, meaning those complex starches have been broken down into simpler structures that microbes can access immediately. It's like serving your soil microbes a pre-digested meal. At just 24 hours I was already seeing visible changes. The cooked rice had begun to break down noticeably, with the grains losing their distinct shape. By the 48-hour mark, the transformation was dramatic. The cooked rice was significantly decomposed, surrounded by what appeared to be a white, fuzzy coating. This was beneficial bacteria and fungi, absolutely thriving on the easily accessible food source. The soil temperature around the cooked rice was noticeably warmer than the surrounding soil, indicating intense metabolic activity from the microbial population boom. When I gently probed the area, the soil had a completely different structure. It was loose, crumbly, and had that rich forest floor smell that tells you biological activity is off the charts. The mycelial networks were clearly visible, creating intricate webs through the soil particles. The difference between these two results comes down to bioavailability. When you cook rice, you're essentially doing the first stage of decomposition yourself. The heat and water break down the tough outer layers and transform complex starches into simpler forms. This means when microbes encounter cooked rice, they can immediately begin extracting energy and multiplying rapidly. Raw rice, while eventually providing the same nutrients, requires soil microbes to produce specific enzymes to break through thaw. By pato though, gray bright grains protective layers and access the starches inside. This process takes time, days or even weeks depending on soil conditions. For our purposes in the garden, time matters because we want to see quick results when we're building soil or preparing beds for planting. So, what does this mean for your gardening practice? I've started using cooked rice strategically in several ways around Ruthhaven grounds. When I'm preparing a new bed, I'll scatter leftover cooked rice throughout the soil about 2 weeks before planting. This gives the microbial population time to explode, break down the rice completely, and stabilize before my plants go in. The result is soil that's alive, well-structured, and ready to support vigorous plant growth. I've also used cooked rice as a spot treatment in established beds where certain areas seem depleted or where plants are showing nutrient deficiency symptoms. A small amount of cooked rice buried near the plant's root zone can trigger a localized burst of microbial activity that often translates to visible plant improvement within a couple of weeks. It's not a magic bullet, but it's a fantastic tool in your soil building arsenal. For compost activation, cooked rice is, honestly, incredible. A handful mixed into a sluggish compost pile can totally restart the heating process and really accelerate decomposition of other materials. Just be moderate with the amounts. Too much rice can create anaerobic pockets if your pile doesn't have enough carbon-rich materials to balance it out. Now, before you start dumping cups of rice into your garden, let me share some cautions from my experiments. Both cooked and raw rice can attract unwanted visitors if used on the soil surface. Rats, mice, and other rodents love rice, so always bury it at least 2 inches deep. I learned this lesson the hard way when I left some on the surface and, well, had evidence of nighttime visitors within days. Cooked rice can also create temporary nitrogen deficiency if you use too much at once. As microbes multiply rapidly to feed on the rice, they temporarily lock up available nitrogen for their own growth. This is usually short-lived and resolves as they die and decompose, but if you're planting immediately, it could stress young plants. My rule of thumb is no more than a 1/4 cup of cooked rice per square foot of bed space, and always allow at least a week for initial decomposition before planting. After running this experiment multiple times with consistent results, here's my honest recommendation. If you want quick microbial activation within 48 to 72 hours, cooked rice is your champion. It's perfect for those situations where you need to rapidly improve soil biology before planting or when you're dealing with particularly lifeless soil that needs a biological jumpstart. Raw rice still has its place, particularly if you're looking for a slow-release amendment that provides sustained microbial food over several weeks. I use it in perennial beds and around established trees where I want long-term soil improvement without the initial intensity of cooked rice. The beautiful thing is that both forms work, they just operate on different timelines. Understanding this difference allows you to choose the right tool for your specific situation, whether you're working with annual vegetables that need quick-growing soil or long-term landscape plantings that benefit from sustained biological activity. I hope this deep dive into the rice and microbes experiment has opened your eyes to just how responsive and dynamic your soil ecosystem really is. These invisible workers are ready and waiting to transform your garden, and sometimes all they need is the right food source to explode into action. I encourage you to try this experiment yourself. There's nothing quite like seeing biological processes unfold in real time to deepen your connection with the soil you're stewarding. If you found this information valuable, please subscribe to Ruthhaven Grounds for more hands-on gardening experiments, soil science explorations, and practical growing tips that actually work in real gardens. Share this article with fellow gardeners who are ready to work with their soil's biology rather than against it. Drop a comment below telling me about your own experiences with soil amendments. I read every single one and love learning from this community. Until next time, keep your hands dirty and your soil alive.